Perin. I'm very happy to be here and very thankful also for the invitation to have the great opportunity to connect with a lot of highly well-educated and very interesting and intelligent people over the last days. I spoke yesterday about, as a reminder, about the governance of blockchain. So we speak about that blockchain is an underlying technology and infrastructure to build new institutions. Because we are actually able to have that as a sovereign infrastructure, which allows us to eliminate to a degree very strong power asymmetries we had for a long time. And now we have an opportunity in that new digital territory, which was created through the emergence of blockchain technologies, that we are actually having a place where governance innovation is happening. And it's happening currently very fast. You might have heard about something called DAOs. That's pretty much decentralized autonomous organizations on top of the blockchain. These are places where we can freely define governance models and try them out. That's very helpful if we want to innovate. Clicker's working perfect. One last question before I start. I'm connected to that Lille Wi-Fi. I'm actually dropping out if we have too many people connecting to that. So if you can deactivate your Wi-Fi for that presentation or not use that login so long, that would be great. All right, so let's speak about the future of governance. And I want to explain before I go into that, because that's really the future of governance in my opinion, about the necessity again, as a reminder. A blockchain as an infrastructure, a public blockchain, is only of value for many stakeholders if the control over that platform is also in the hands of many. And if we have a way to ensure that the interests of those people which are using it is equally met. This means if a platform, a global infrastructure like the internet or a blockchain solution is captured by one party, then this means you have excessive power over everything what is run under that infrastructure. And that's very dangerous. That's exactly the power we are currently seeing accumulating in super big corporations like Facebook, Amazon, Google. And this is where we lose our digital sovereignty and freedom with that. It has also a very strong economic impact, obviously, because we lose millions and millions because, as we learned, the new oil is data. So let's look into how we can preserve a sovereign infrastructure by changing the way how we do governance and how we can use that to manage blockchain solutions, but how can we use those paradigms as well to change the way how we do governance in general. So the topic and the focus will be viable distributed governance systems, theory and actions. Short reminder, I'm working with a lot of infrastructure projects which are related to blockchain directly, which are Swarm as a storage solution and communication layer, Raven as a security solution which is able to reflect on a higher level on the health of the network, Phoenix as an open source initiative to combine resources in Europe to provide alternative services to things like like Office, Google Docs and so on. And DGOV.Foundation, and that's the initiative I'm currently representing today. That's about how we can iterate and innovate on governance. Brief overview. These will be the topics which I will cover today. I will point out multiple times what DGOV is about. That's kind of the initiative we started last year, which is also focusing on innovating governance, but more on the NGO side. And we have currently no public funding. It's purely based on volunteers and collaboration with blockchain initiatives which see the need for innovation and governance. So what is governance? What is distributed governance? I mean, what is governance? You know, if I put it down into distributed governance, it's the question, how do we distribute decision-making power, or how do we distribute in general the governance process to many participants? Because one of the main problems we like to tackle is accumulation of power and with that the corruption which occurs. We live in crazy times, and actually there's also a need for distributed governance because we see that very bad decisions are made by very ignorant individuals which have very much power. So let's address or speak about the madness of power. So I believe if you look at communism, if you look at capitalism, if you look at whatever system, it comes down to always the same flaw. That humans which hold a lot of power become ignorant and they become actually addicted by it. It's more like an illness. It's not that they are bad in general. They are, in some cases, loving family fathers or whatever, but power seems to corrupt people. So the question is, if this is the underlying problem we want to solve, that we have better decisions based on more reasoning, then maybe we need to think about how can we eliminate the accumulation of power a little bit more, especially in a global world where the fate of millions of people are then suddenly connected to one person. We have also a missing theory of choice. So the question is, or I'm still looking for more, so if you have something and you can enlighten me, please tell me. We have very little theory about what a good decision actually is. And I think that we as a society and also in the political spectrum, we need to speak more about what a good decision is. So what is ethics? And I can only highlight a very good insight I got from this podcast from Collective Insights, which is what is ethics and an exploration of choice in law. I think it's very valuable because it's the first time that I heard a theory which connects on a fundamental level ethics and decision making in a scientific way. So I think that statement just reflects what I said before. Power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If we look at this, how much power can you hold and how high is the risk of destruction? In this case, we just have the situation that very little individuals have super massive negative impacts to other people and our environment out of ignorance. Yeah, I think out of ignorance, it's the best description. So what needs to change? We need to make better decisions because the technologies we have available to impact our planet and our environment are exponential technologies, which means they give us exponential more power. But they doesn't tell anything, they doesn't say anything about what is a good decision or what is a bad decision. It's like with nuclear power. We can build nuclear bombs or we can use nuclear fusion energy or whatever, but nobody tells us, you know, what to do from a scientific point of view. So I believe that we don't have the choice if we want to survive as a species and if we want to have a flourishing future, then to start to include that in our, say, decision-making, in which direction we want to invest, in which direction we want to research and how we want to use this knowledge. Because AI and blockchains and robotics can be combined to fully autonomous killer robots which can kill every high-profile target without a big problem. It is a very strong power asymmetry. The money which is needed to do those attacks are get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and the ability to defend against those attacks is harder to catch up with. We have the same situation in the IT space with IT security. We have more and more flawed systems. The chance of a total failure of the internet is increasingly higher. And if we don't shift over from complicated systems to complex systems, we will not be able to handle that in the future. So how do we are changing over with that amount of power as a society to make good decisions, to make sustainable decisions, and also to empower us as citizens, as digital citizens, to participate in the political process? We are currently in an exponential curve, and I want to use a picture which comes from nature, that this is something which is not unusual. So we have, for example, in a pregnancy, we have the situation that the child in the mother is growing actually in an exponential rate. And if the child would be born later, it would kill its mother. So we have that exponential curve also in nature until you need to reach that certain point where you need to shift totally the way how your metabolism works and how your interaction with the world works to ensure that, for example, in this case, the mother, but also the child can live. So the child is born, changes totally the way how it interacts with the world, and then continues to grow on a close to exponential scale until you're grown out. right? So this means this is not unusual that things in nature happen that way, but it's the first time for humanity that we reach that point of exponential growth. And we have never done it before. There is no past point in history where we had done a phase shift. So we don't know how to do it right. We have exactly one chance to do that. And this is going to be interesting, what this means. We need to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility for the state we are aware of right now. And if we don't, that's just madness. To recognize that there is a problem which we need to tackle, but ignoring it is madness. So I hope that everybody who recognizes problems is actively tackling them. And I can only emphasize, if you're not in a position with your current job to do it, maybe there are other ways to do that. And I'm getting a little bit emotional, maybe you feel that, but I'm very happy to not being trapped in a position where I'm not able to communicate what I'm communicating right now, and where I'm not trapped in a position where I'm not having the feeling that I can take part in a change which is necessary for change in the way how we do governance towards better governance models. Humans are highly adaptable, and we have adapted to a highly competitive environment based on our economic models. This means we are grown up in a highly competitive way and to win-lose games. So we're used to play win-lose games, and those win-lose games which were played over the last centuries, they don't work anymore because there is no land left to invade and to just take. Like the whole planet is settled by humans. We have the situation that if we fight win-lose games with atomic bomb, that nobody wins anymore. So this means that the rules of the win-lose game are not anymore applicable. If I exploit resources heavily to get a financial benefit, I destroy nature and economic, say, systems which are underlying, which are necessary to regenerate, for example, resources required for our survival. So there is no way that I can win and the other one can lose without indirectly losing as well. So we need to shift over. We need to shift from our way of competition in our governments, in our party systems, which try to win over the other, towards collaborative behavior, to start to think in which cases we can come to good conclusions, to synergy effects. We need to switch over to win-win games. So there is this point of win-lose games, finite win-lose games. We can't play finite win-lose games. We need to transition to infinite win-win games. And I highly recommend to check out all the X courses which I linked down here if you're interested in that. What are the universal laws? I have no idea. I just guess, right? So I'm searching for them since a while, and I'm interested in whoever is interested in speaking about it as well. There are some things which are discovered in physics which point in that direction, right? But what are the basic principles we know we hold true to base our governance systems based on those basic principles? I will share some perspectives on that today. One is interconnectedness. I claim that there is no way that you can have an isolated event anywhere on this planet. If you go down to quantum physics levels, you will see that everything influences everything. And if we think about resonance, we will see that there is no way of doing isolated actions, which means we are all connected somehow. More directly than you think, maybe in some cases, because humans are actually exchanging mRNA, for example, when they are close to each other. Every heartbeat everybody of us has is creating electromagnetic waves which are floating around. We have morphogenic fields which are interacting with our environment. We breathe, we sweat, we radiate heat. So this means like our boundaries, our skin is not our boundary. We're interconnecting and interconnected all the time and interconnected and communicating with our environment all the time. So this interconnectedness is also true for nature, and this is also true if I consume something on this side of the planet and I've taken something through a supply chain from the other side of the planet, that this has an impact. And we need to think about complexity. We can't ignore where things come from. We need to start to take responsibility for those things. And this is all true if we want to build good governance systems, and this is also true if you want to have good governance systems for distributed global fabrics as a core infrastructure for a society. So let's speak about complex systems thinking, because that's actually a recognition which could help us to change our ways of thinking to be successful with the design of complex systems. I think the shift over to human-centric systems is as important as the system thinking itself. Humans itself are complex systems. And when we look in the blockchain space, there are many people running around who want to tokenize everything. I think that's terrible. And I can tell also why, because it means that we override the sense-making of the agent with incentives, extrinsic incentives, which are controlling the agent out of greed to do something. So this means that we are actually exploiting the sovereignty of the agent and their own sense-making and bypassing it to make decisions based on extrinsic incentives. Which means that those architects of those incentive systems claim that they know better than the agent what they should do. I think that's fundamentally flawed and wrong, because I don't want to be programmed and I don't want my children to be programmed. So I think we should be very careful with how we set extrinsic incentives. Ignorance is the mother of all evils, but in the end we are all ignorant. And you might say, no, 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 I'm not ignorant. But the problem is with complexity, that complexity of reality is close. We don't know how complex. I would claim infinite complex, which means there's always a level down and always a level up. And complex systems are actually too complex to be simulated. And think about a football game. We're not even able to predict the outcome of a football game. How ignorant are we to think that we can predict the whole world? We can describe the smallest pieces, and that's very important for our understanding of this world. But we can't predict the complexity arises by the interaction of all the small pieces. And I think that's very important to recognize, and to recognize that we are, as humans, are very limited in understanding that complexity. If you think about humans, then we can ask the question of, in which cell is the you? If you can come to me and explain this to me, I will change my mind about mechanistic worldviews. But as long as science has no good explanation for consciousness and for how intelligence arises, I might stay at that point that I believe that complex systems are too complex to be fully modeled. So there seems to be an emerging property in us, which is happening between the interconnectivity of the cells, which we describe as I, or which we have as our intelligence. What we see here down is actually birds forming like patterns, very hard, or I would claim impossible to predict, because we don't know how the single bird will behave. So these are emerging structures based on like the birds interconnecting with each other. In general, if you look in nature, there's actually only like complex systems. It's like if you break it down, the ecosystems of forests is unbelievable. You can break it down and down and down and down, and you see how all those small animals, plants, microbes, fungi are interconnected to form this forest, and how they serve all different purposes. So I would claim that every one of us is actually the emergence of nature. That we wouldn't be here if nature wouldn't be there. Which means that we are also not X years old, because you're a consequence out of evolution and are from your parents, the parents of your parents, and so on. We are millions of years old, like the DNA which we kind of evolved through. This is very old. And we are synergetic, which means like our cells in our bodies are actually, a majority of them are like viruses and microbiomes, and we have fungi in us. So there's like, we are not just human cells, and we couldn't survive if we would only be human cells. So we are collaboration. And what I said before, what is I have no idea. Every human understanding of reality is a model, and every model is oversimplification of reality. But the model is not reality. which means if we build governance systems, they are fundamentally limited in their ability to embody complexity, and therefore they will always be inferior to complexity. So we need to find a way that we can adapt governance models continuously and that we can embody more and more complexity to solve complex, like high complex problems we currently face also on a global level. What we need to get is a way to integrate maximum cognitive diversity. What is this? This means that we all hold models of reality, and if we find a way to communicate very well, we can exchange our views. And with that, we are able to actually embody as a group more complexity than one single individual. And if we have good decision-making structures where we can exchange our views, then we get less ignorant and we embody more complexity. And that's what I was speaking about, that we need to shift over from win-lose games to collaboration. We need to really try to understand the problems which are underlying in a depth which is required to make good decisions. This is a quote from Jordan Greenhall. We need an entire different model of dealing with reality, a new frame of mind, a collective intelligence. This is an ability to come into communion with a group and act as a single unit of intelligence. If you think about the complex system, the human, that we have this arising intelligence, then think about you all in this room as cells being part of an emerging collective intelligence. And there are theories about how you can create collective intelligence and how you can effectively tap into it. But if you look at the cells in a body, it's about collaboration. If you have a cell in your body which is competing and exploiting, then it's very close to a cancer cell, right? The cancer cell doesn't care about the rest, just getting resources, multiplying, in survival and adaptation mode. So this is what is required to shift our behavior, to find a new way to connect with each other, to get a very high throughput with each other in the communication, to allow us to tap into collective intelligence. There is also, obviously, theory about that, this is from Wikipedia, about collective intelligence. It claims that we need coordination, cooperation, and cognition. There's market judgments and predictions of future events in politics and technology. In this area, we have networks of trust, open source software, and peer-to-peer products, and a ad hoc community and coordination of collective action. Let's do a short quiz. Do you know anything in the blockchain space which does market judgments and predictions of future events in politics and technology? Yes, Argo and Gnosis, prediction markets. Absolutely right. So Argo and Gnosis are prediction markets where you can bet on the future. It's not, I would say it's important to discuss what this really means, because I strongly believe that there are all the opportunity of future events, but if we do not be conscious about, like if we are not conscious about what we are wishing for, we are actually getting outcome we don't want. So that means if everybody believes that we will destroy ourselves, then we optimize for that outcome. We increase that probability because we don't look for alternatives. We have distributed ledger technologies as something of network of trust, peer-to-peer business and open source software. And we have DGOV, which is the initiative we created to find better ways of ad hoc communities and coordination of collective actions based on social protocols. And that together seems to go in the direction of collective intelligence. But let's speak about more prerequisites for that, because sovereignty is something which is around in the last time. We speak about digital sovereignty to be able to have a sovereign nation state, which means that we are actually able to self-govern in our authority. But this goes down. The smallest unit of governance is you and me. Like ourselves, we can self-govern ourselves, which means like we have a governance model for ourselves. And it's important to be aware that we can change that. There are viable patterns for distributed governance systems, I believe. And I want to share those viable. 3 minutes? Okay. Sorry, okay. So I will just not go in depth, but share them with you very easy. It's like scalable. This means like we have fractal structures for participation and governance structures. Considerative, which means like embodying maximum cognitive diversity to be able to embody more complexity for good decision making. Omni-considerative decision making, which is this win-win outcome to create the maximum amount of benefits for the maximum amount of sentient beings or humans for the maximum amount of time. Cohesion, which is exactly the opposite of what we currently see in friction and social media, which is creating extremism, leading to conflict. If we want to find a way to solve the problems we have on a global scale, we need to ensure that we get systems which create cohesion. And this is also important that our information exchange systems are reworked, so to say. Subsidiarity practices, which means that problems are solved on a level where they occur. That's the only way how we can handle the concurrency of all events and problems. Open and transparent, which means that our structures should be based on open and transparent infrastructure we can verify and which we can adapt. Secure and resilient, which means that we need high fault tolerance, resilience against outages, and distribution of infrastructure. That plays back into infrastructure of blockchain. And we need to shift over to complex governance systems, which means that we need to have a way to, in my opinion, directly participate, to raise issues in participation, to do collective sense-making, to propose collective action, and to have reflection on our impact and on our ways how we actually reflect on our own governance systems, so that we are able to change those systems and functions, and to reflect on the reflection functions as well. So all those different areas need research, which governance function we can apply to do direct participatory engagement of citizens. Just to say that, we are all biased, which means our worldviews and our beliefs filter what we perceive, what we make sense out, how we decide, and what we reflect on. And we need to be very cautious, which means that ideologies are an essential part to think about when we want to reform governance. I think I'm having no more time because time is up. 2 more minutes, 1 more minute. I want to share the vision, what DGOV is about. So the initiative I'm part of. DGOV connects people to discover practices, implements technical solutions, and create complex, scalable governance systems that create cohesion and allow people to flourish. Why? Because we need better decision making. How? Community to research and implement distributed governance models, which means we try to achieve the goal to embody a higher degree of complexity to build those systems. And what we currently build that community by creating events where we bring together international researchers, explorers, entrepreneurs, and whoever has something valuable to offer for this community. Yeah, I think just as a last example before we close it down, this is an example of perception. Do you know what this is? Do you know what it is? Does your pattern recognition tell you something? I'm sure some people have seen it before. A name of a movie? Matrix. All right, pattern recognition worked. Now we get a better resolution, right? So we increase our resolution by embodying more complexity. And actually, it actually works wonderful. But what we want to get to make good decisions is a 360-degree picture of the problem. We don't want to have a partial part of a perception to make a decision based on that. So this is what we need to do if we want to embody complexity and make good decisions, and this is what we need in perception. So yeah, I think I don't have any time left, or do I? So thanks for your attention. I would love to, but
Tim, this is really fascinating to all of us, because this shows the maturity of the subject. Whereas for us, for me, I mean, for the most of us, I suspect that it's only an introduction. So we are very happy that you came, and we have seen all your projects, and you have been recorded too, so people will be able to receive your presentation and know more if needed. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thanks for your attention.